Your discernment for people and situations is powerful, and you need to pay attention to that. So that happened somewhere in my early 30s. And so that was when I really became more like aware and like, okay, maybe I need to pay attention to more. Like I could see that some of the stuff wasn't just like random connections that were or occurrences.
So then at that point or even now, do you do things like, are you more intentional about fostering that connection with that little voice? Like, do you have any practices around that or? Welcome back to The Intuitive Voice. I'm your host, Angela Huebner, and the lovely Martha Arnett is away on vacation. And so today I am so excited to have the honor of interviewing my friend, Angie Kieger. And I'm going to read Angie's bio, and then we're going to talk. I'm going to tell you how I know her, but let me do her real bio first, her professional bio first. Angie Kieger, MED, CTRS, ATP, SMS, she's got a lot of acronyms, is a nationally recognized speaker, educator, and advocate with over 25 years of experience in therapeutic recreation and assistive technology. Throughout her career, she has focused on empowering individuals with disabilities through access to complex rehab technology and meaningful person-centered care. Known for her engaging teaching style and ability to translate complex topics into relatable, actionable conversations, Angie is celebrated for her talent in connecting people and building lifelong personal and professional relationships. She has presented across the U.S. and internationally, mentoring professionals and collaborating with caregivers and wheelchair users to promote independence, function, and joy. As the creator and host of the Wheelchair Nerds podcast, I just love that, Angie dives into real stories, emerging trends, and honest conversations around mobility, inclusion, and life with assistive technology. Born and raised in Lynchburg, Virginia, Angie brings a grounded and approachable perspective to everything she does. Outside of work, she is a devoted dog mom to Rambo and a proud aunt and sister, and someone who deeply values time with their friends. She's an enthusiastic beginner golfer, a casual pickleball player, and an avid traveler, especially when there's a beach, sunrise, or sunset involved. Welcome, Angie. I'm really glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I love the fact that you're doing a podcast, so this is super cool.
So I have to let the listeners know, I have known you for, it feels like a million years. Because I've known Angie for probably, I don't know, at least 12 or 15 years.
For sure.
And never have we had a conversation about intuition before. And that's why I'm so excited about this. And that's part of what Martha and I were hoping to have happen, is to make these conversations, a little more just what people talk about. Like bring it out into the open. And so when I was talking with Angie about the podcast, she's like, "Oh my goodness, I use intuition all the time." So, so let's get into it. So,
yeah, for sure.
So tell me, when you think about intuition, like what do you think about? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
So it's funny because I've always said the little voice in my head, which, when you, depending on who you say that to, right? Some people are going to be like, the little voice in your head, like, is that really the healthy? I'm going to take Rambo's collar off so it doesn't jingle. And this doesn't need to be edited out if you don't want it to. Rambo's been on many a podcast. And
Rambo's welcome here.
It's
Dog
very
friendly.
inclusive, buddy.
Yeah.
So I always thought I'm a little voice in my head because that wasn't the only thing I think growing up that I really could like attribute it. Like, what is that? Like, be going along and like something would say something that's like, you have to be cautious who you say that to, or people might think you're literally hearing voices, because obviously there are documented psychological disorders where people do hear voices.
Right.
But yeah, that's how I think about it. Oh, and then that's still how I talk about it. I grew up going to church. I do identify as a Christian. Don't avidly go to church nowadays, but very spiritual. And I think that some people will say your angel voice, your God voice, all the things. But to me, I typically will hear something, or I also see things.
Okay.
So I would not say like I'm ready to start a podcast and be like the next TLC medium or whatever, but there are some freaky things that have happened where I'm like, oh yeah, I totally saw that happening before it happened.
Okay. So I'm loving that you're talking about how it shows up for you. That for you, it's either as an image or a voice. For me, it's more audio And Martha's very visual, so that's really cool. How was it talked about in your growing up with your family, or was it?
It wasn't really. I think the earliest memory that I could ponder is I remember I knew I could do, like, I was like, I would know things were going to happen, or I get like a feeling, something's going to happen, but I don't know what it is. That was the thing where, like, when I've listened to your podcast, you talk about how you have to like tap into it. And I often wonder when I get that, like, something's going to happen feeling, if I tapped into my intuition more, if I could actually like fill in the blank of like what the something is. But I remember it was middle school or elementary school, thinking about something and writing it down. And I was like, oh, I bet this is going to happen. I was like, I'm going to put it in my toy box. And so I put it in my toy box. And I guarantee you my best friend from growing up does not remember this, but I remember I put it in my toy box. So I wrote on a piece of paper, put the date on it. And then when it did happen, inevitably, I was like, I knew it was going to happen,
Wow.
So,
Angie, was that something that happened to you or for other people? Like what?
It was for other people. It was related to Gene.
Okay.
And so, but I would also say, and this is something, I think this is how I first piqued your attention. I will never forget. This is my favorite story to tell about you. And I'll tell it now. But so as Angela mentioned, we have friends that are in common, and we became friends from those friends. And one friend in particular, she and her husband have a pool in their backyard. So as you might imagine, Angela and I happily partook in many happy hours and evenings by this pool. And we're there with a group of friends, and somebody said something, and I was like, oh yeah, someone tried to kidnap me as a child, and just kind of blew it off. And they're like, oh, really? And they're like, what are the details? And I was like, oh, I remember every detail about it. And they're like, oh, you don't mind talking about it? I'm like, no. Well, about that time, the host said, oh, the food's in the kitchen. You guys want to get up to go get it? And so we're all slowly getting up. And it was just you and I were the last ones to stand up. And I sat there and I was like, isn't it cool, Angela, that fact, like, I can remember every detail down to the detail that my friend, the last person I saw, was wearing. I was like, I was in second grade. Isn't that crazy? And I remember you took a sip of your drink and you were like, cool or trauma, one of the two. It's up to you. And I was like, and in her personal circles, Angela does not talk psychology. Like, you know nothing about, like, she always says, I'm not here to treat, like, I'm here to be your friend. But it piqued my attention to be like, huh. But I don't think I've ever actually shared with you in depth about that. And I still can talk about it. Definitely have been in therapy to work and process through it. But looking back, that probably was the first little voice in my head. And I can actually, even as I talk about it now, I can picture how all of it happened. And I'm happy to share that story because it was an instance where I did not listen to the little voice in my head. And it's exactly what, it's what happened. So so there was this was second grade. People laugh at me. But in second grade, I had this crush on this little boy. His name was Brandon, and he did karate. And so I was allowed to, this is back in the 80s, so we're allowed to ride our bikes in our neighborhoods, no problem, safe down to Lynchburg, Virginia. And there were always certain streets I would stay on. But then there was, if I went over one more street, I could go see if other kids were home. So I did that, and I played on this one street. It's a cul-de-sac, and I remember as we were playing, I didn't go to the street very often. I remember as I was playing, I was like, this one car, it was a blue car that was going up and down the street. And it kept like looking at us, like slowly, like turning around. And my little voice in my head was like, there's something up with that person, that car.
Okay.
And I remember I looked at it and I made eye contact, but I kept blowing it off. Or I'm like, I don't know what that is. So everybody else had to go. Brandon had to go to karate practice. And as I was leaving the street that I was on, I had the chance to go left or right to go back home, or left to go see if there was more kids that wanted to play. My siblings will tell you I'm the most social of all three of us. So of course I'm like, I still got time. Before I have to go home for dinner, let's go see who else is home. So I went over one more street and I saw that car again. And it was driving slow, and it's, it's a neighborhood, your quintessential suburban neighborhood. And I see my friend Jackie Mullen. Like I said, I can remember exactly what Jackie was wearing. I was like, can you play? And she's like, no, I'm going to dinner with other neighbors. I'm like, okay. And right after she left, she went inside the other person's house. The car pulled up again. So he was driving up a hill. I was on my bike going down the hill. And at that moment, I was like, oh no. And so what happened was he like rolled down his window and he said, come here, I have to ask you a question. I was like, no. And I froze. And then he started to like open the door and kind of like move towards me. But what happened was another car came down the street, and I think it spooked him. And so like he drove off. And then I made my way back home. But no, looking back, like I said, I've said to my therapist, I'm like, why didn't I go home? Like, why didn't I just, like, I saw this guy. Like, why wasn't I, like, listen to the little voice in your head? And so that was a big instance, I think, where it really clicked with me. And I would tell people, no, like, I knew something was going to happen. Like, I knew it. Like, I could just tell. And I remember when I was doing the police report, like, I remember, like, drawing out his face. And I think the policeman, I'm a second grader, right? So I think he was kind of doubting, like, how do you remember all these details?
Yeah.
Well, it was because I remember thinking, I need to look at this guy. But I, of course, was in second grade, so I didn't think to get his license plate. But I was very detailed about it because the little voice in my head kept telling me there's something about this guy.
Okay. So Angie, did that sort of propel you into listening to your voice about you?
Yeah.
Did that, like, shift, you know what I mean? How you paid attention to it?
It did. And that's where I was like, oh, maybe I do know when things are going to happen, or like have, like, a good sense. Those little plastic green army men. Yep. So my brother had those, shocking. And I'm in the 80s. And so I remember I was scared of those, like, little, or infant or toddlers. I remember I could pull up and stand on there. I remember seeing those little green army men. And I had that memory for decades. But what I couldn't ever put together as an adult, or as a teenager, whenever I first started really thinking about this, was, why was my crib in Barry's room? Because I knew it was very distinct to the room I was in. Like, that made no sense. We each had our own bedroom. And so I remember asking my brother about this, and he's 6 years older, and I was like telling him the age I was. He said, oh, well, we shared a room for a little bit because Mom and Dad were painting and doing stuff in your room. I was like, oh. So, like, that memory, that very well could be an accurate memory.
Okay, kind of verified.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how has intuition guided you throughout your life? So you've got some really vivid memories from childhood. How has it guided you in your work and other parts of your life?
Well, so I there's some funny stories about that, but then there's also, like, when you think about work, for the longest time, people would ask me things like, well, how do you know things? And that was always the hardest, like, in my early 20s, because it's a weird niche. I know people are listening going, she's a wheelchair nerd? Like, what in the world? Like, how did I get into this? How do I know so much about people with disabilities? And
talk about that. That's a big deal.
Yeah. So my cousin has cerebral palsy. She is verbal. She's in her 50s now. She still ambulates, needs to have some knee surgery. She has intellectual disabilities. And I volunteered at her camps growing up. Like, I was always very empathetic and always, went to Susan's camps. And my two siblings didn't. I only have 4 first cousins. And so they're all in Lynchburg. And, I knew I wanted to do something with people with disabilities. Didn't know what it was. Did not want to be a teacher. God bless all the teachers out there. I knew I couldn't be stuck in a classroom. And then stumbled upon recreation therapy when I was in college because I was in some sort of, like, introduction courses they make you take with your first year, freshman year. It's been way too long now for me to remember. And then a girl from my hometown who was friends with my brother actually came in and did talk about, like, different, like, majors they were taking. And so, like, I remember being like, oh, it's really intriguing. So that's how I decided to become a recreation therapist. But when I look back to when I volunteered at the camp, so my very early days, is I always had kind of a knack or understanding. Like, I always knew the people that were looked at nowadays, I'll say, were nonverbal. And people always, like, put them in an institution or thought that there was something wrong with them or that they were scary or because they couldn't talk, were usually the folks that I would kind of, like, move towards. And I don't know why, because I remember my first year there, everybody wanted to volunteer at this camp, wanted to be in the toddler program, because who doesn't want to be in the toddler program with babies? And so the only place that was available was the lack of better, this is a terrible name for it, but the severe and profound room. And I'm like, okay. And I just remember, like, I very much bonded with those students, children's campers, they want to call them, that were in there. Some of them were verbal, some of them weren't. And when I remember when I went home after my first week of volunteering there, my sister's like, I just think it's so interesting that you're doing this. I said, why? And she said, don't you remember? And I was like, I don't know. And one summer we stayed with them for a couple of days. We went to a Christmas in July celebration. And Betsy says, and once she reminded me of it, I could definitely remember it. There was likely a group home that brought adults that were with severe and profound disabilities, who back then wheelchairs looked very scary, way more scary than they look now. Because I was younger, I was born in '78, so early '80s. And Betsy said, you were scared. Like, she's like, I remember you were scared of them, but you somehow then you like calmed down because everyone, of course, is looking at these people. And then she's like, and now like you somehow like you created this like bond with them. And I said, well, I always believe people are in there. Like,
right.
Angie,
can you talk about, I'm sorry, can you talk about how your intuition guided you to that? Because it sounds like you've got a lot of knowing, but I think our listeners really also want to hear about like, how did you follow? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So looking at like choosing my internship was a big thing. So kind of fast forwarding through that. I remember a lot of doors were closing for my internship, and I was trying to force things to work. And when you're undergraduate recreation therapy, I had to do a junior internship in the summer and a senior one. And so I thought I knew exactly the place where I wanted to go to do mine. I had the dream location for me. Ironically, it's closed now. Kluge's Rehab Hospital in Charlottesville. That was off of UVA. And so I was like, I want to do that rehab hospital. And a little voice in my head kept saying, that's a long shot. It's not going to happen. And I was like, no, little voice, like it will happen. And I was so disappointed when I didn't get it. And I'm like, I guess I have to apply to some other adult facilities. And I was like, and I just kept thinking, a little voice. And I was like, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. I'm like, well, then, okay, little voice. I don't plan on leaving. Like, I need to be somewhere where I can stay with somebody that I know to save money. And I just kept feeling like it's nudging of like, well, when you go back to school, like you need to look in the records and see what else, because most schools, when they have internships, they'll have like a record. And I remember there was like a little index card box back in the day, and, looking through those, and there was this one kind of raggedy card that said the Hospital for Sick Children. I'm like, the heck is the Hospital for Sick Children? And it had Washington, D.C. on it. And I was like, So I called my mom and I was like, I'm going to apply to this one. I don't know who I would stay with in Washington, D.C. And my sister actually at the time lived up here. She lived out in Fairfax at this point. So it would have been a long commute, and I couldn't stay with her, but I just kept feeling like I'm supposed to apply to this internship. Didn't hear anything from them. Like I called them and never, it felt like it was taking too long. It was getting like pressure from my professors, because I had a couple of offers. Like, it's like, you need to decide, like, where are you going? You need to, agree. And I finally, there was a place called the Richmond Home, I think is what it's called. And it's a long-term care facility. They don't have any pediatric folks there, but they had a pretty cool rec therapy program. And I was like, I guess this is where I'm supposed to go. But then I kept thinking, I drug my feet on signing that paperwork, because I was just like, this is not it. And then one day I was back home in Lynchburg working, because I worked my part-time job at Kroger throughout my high school and college days. And I would go home on the weekends to work, kept my seniority. And I was at Kroger, and my mom called me and said, hey, I just gave somebody your number at Kroger. I'm like, I could assure you back then, like, I didn't have a cell phone. I'm like, how would Mom do this? Mom said, some lady called from the place called the Hospital for Sick Children, and she really wants to talk to you. Like, okay. So I remember I waited for her. She called, and she's like, oh my gosh. She said, the person that your application first went to, he's been promoted. He didn't see it. I saw it. And I knew I had to call you.
Wow.
And I was her first intern. And so it was just like one of those things where if I would have gone ahead and signed the Virginia home, I very much, once I commit to something and I can't, it's like, I know myself, I would have been like, wah, wah, I guess I have to go, I wouldn't have changed it. But yeah, so that was
what a great
that's where I ended up working for 12 years. That's where I met Amanda, who's the friend whose daughters played softball together. And most of my network from that I still have in the DC Metro comes from the Hospital for Sick Children.
Okay. So what a fabulous example of there's a part of you that knew. And I love that even though you were getting pressure from others, you stuck with it. You stuck with it. Angie,
I couldn't say why. That's the weird thing, right? So I couldn't say why. And then I think for years I kind of teetered with this idea that, like, a little voice in my head. So, like, early 20s, I kind of like didn't really pay attention to it. And then when it came up again, as I had started growing up, going to church, I always kind of felt like I wanted to get back into going to church. So I went to church with some of my friends. I'm actually still very good friends with some of those folks now. And we had a small group, which a lot of churches do. And leaving, if you've ever worked in Washington, D.C., you know full well if you live in Virginia, is a nightmare commute home. And I was working in D.C., and I had to be at small group out near, at the time, my friend's husband was at Fort Belvoir. So I know, Angela, you can picture that drive home was a nightmare.
It's a long drive.
And
it's not a long drive, it's a trafficy drive.
Yes. And it was a rainy night, and it was dark. So it was like in the winter, and it was dark. And so I remember I finally got to her house. I'm like, I've got to find parking. I'm like, I've just got to get in. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so late. This is embarrassing. And so I see her house, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to park right here. Little voice in my head says, don't park here. And I'm literally like arguing with little voice in my head, right? I'm like, it is raining. Okay. I am late. Shut up. And so I drove around the block. I was like, fine, little voice in my head. And I drove around the block one more time, and there was no parking. I'm like, okay, little voice, you're crazy. Like, this is clearly meant to be. This is the one parking spot that's here. This is where I'm supposed to park. So parallel parked, hopped in, went on in, went into, we were there the whole time. And then people started leaving, and I have still really good friends with this person. And so Casey and I were just sitting around talking, and as people were leaving, this one woman left, and then she came back, and her husband, and then Casey's husband at the time, opened the door and was like, hey, who drives a Honda Accord that parked directly behind our driveway? And I was like, oh, no, no, hold on. It's even better this, because Chad was like, uh-oh, somebody the person who's leaving just hit somebody's car. And I said to Casey, because Casey still remembers, I said, it's mine. And Casey's like, what? I'm like, it's my car. And she's like, well, no. It's like, how do you know? I'm like, trust me. And so Chad was like, hey, who's got the Honda Accord? And Casey's like, oh, shit, Ange. I'm like, yep. And so the woman had backed in and hit my car. And I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was like one of those things where a little voice in my head told me not to park there. And so I remember I came back inside, and Casey looked at me, because Casey's very much like me also. She sees things more. Like, somebody can walk up to her and she'll know, she'll get a sense right away. Sometimes she'll actually see like images pop above their head, be like, no, or like words that pop above their head. And I remember she's like, and you always say that you don't have a God voice, you have no intuition. Like, she said, your discernment for people and situations is powerful, and you need to pay attention to that. So that happened somewhere in my early 30s. And so that was when I really became more like aware and like, okay, maybe I need to pay attention to more. Like, I could see that some of the stuff wasn't just like random connections that were happening or occurrences.
So then at that point, or even now, do you do things like, are you more intentional about fostering that connection with that little voice? Like, do you have any practices around that, or just can you talk about that?
I want to have practices around that. That's one of the reasons why I started listening to your podcast, because what would happen is when life got busy, I remember I was telling somebody, I was like, I feel like I lose it. Or if people question it. Or people,
right.
So I like my close network of people, of my good friends. Another great example of this is back when I was working at the hospital. I remember I was driving home one night, and I had a really good friend growing up. We were in youth group together. She was about 5 years older than me. And, we were always kind of a strange friendship to my parents, because she was so much older, but we were just really we just clicked and were really good friends. And then I became very close with her mother too. Nancy and I had a falling out because her first husband, I remember I didn't go to the wedding because I was like, nope, there's something he just wasn't right for her, which was a poor choice. In retrospect, I should have supported my friend, but I was in my early 20s or teens. This is what you do at that time. And so, but I still stayed in touch with her mom over the years. And I remember I would randomly be prompted in my 20s to like call Linda and just catch up with her. I was Nancy's mom. And I called her mama. So I remember I just would call mama and be like, hey, mom, what's going on? And one time when I called her, she's like, hey, kiddo, I want to talk to you about something. She's like, Nancy's been diagnosed with GI cancer. It's pretty serious. This is what's going on. I'm like, okay. And I can't say, every time I would call Linda, it was right when something big was happening. And I couldn't
for her.
For Linda and also for Nancy.
Okay.
And so it's probably one of the biggest regrets of not listening to the little voice was I was driving home from the hospital. I was in First Street Tunnel, and I got this very massive prompting, like, you need to call Linda right now. You need to call Linda, and you need to get to Lynchburg. And I remember being like, I am sitting in traffic. this is ridiculous. Like they just made it so hands-free was a big thing. I'm like, I can't pull the phone out, but I could not stop. So I called and I was like, hey, Ma. And I said, because I called her Mama. I said, just checking in. I was like, yeah, how's Nanny doing? And she said, her can't. She's like, she's just not good. Because I talked to her a couple months before, and she was doing okay. And she said, we're in the hospital. Like, we think, this is pretty close to the end. And I was like, wait, I'll come to Lynchburg. I'll come right now. I'll come. And she's like, no, sweetie. She's like, I don't want you to see her like this. She's like, she's gone. Like and I remember just being like, little voice, like, why didn't, and leading up to that, I kept feeling promptings like, you need to call Linda. But I just was so busy. Like, you need to call Linda. And so when I tell people those stories, or when I say something about, like, I'll warn some friends. My friend Casey's always like, girl, tell me. She's like, if you feel something or hear something, like, tell me. But then I've had other friends where it's completely freaked them out. Yeah. That I've been able to call right before something happens, or I've been able to know it. So then I think, and I had one friend who it really, really freaks out. And like, and we're still very close friends, but it upsets her to the point where I found myself like shutting it down. Like I just wouldn't call her. I remember talking with my therapist, like, what do I do? Like, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is going to happen. And she's like, you've got to let people live their own life. You have to let it go. And so I spent, in order to, I wouldn't say repair, but in order to continue to foster a friendship with this person, because this person meant a lot to me, I know I kind of like shut it down for a number of years. And it's just when your podcast launched where I was like, I need to think, like, I missed that, like, that weird party trick that I had where I could figure out when stuff was going to happen.
Well, I love what you're saying, though, because Martha and I talk about that, as you know, the when we get super busy and we don't listen, like that can shut it down. Yep. And the other is exactly what you said. When we tell people, like, a lot of people have opinions about that. Oh, yeah. And so one of the things that both Martha and I have learned is, it's two things. One is you don't have to say all you know. Right? Like you can feel it and know it, and you can let it guide you as opposed to having it guide somebody else if you're not invited in. Like, yes.
That's what I'm working on learning, right? So, and the funny part is even as you're saying that, I picture myself as being the kid who put the note in the toy box, right? So could I actually do that? Like, could I just write it down? And just that way, like, for my own knowing, to go back and track it and be like, hey, was I on point? Did that actually happen? As opposed to being like, hey, this is going to happen to you. Be careful. Like, just like, you know.
Well, and really, really honing it for your own use, right? So that you're really connected to your voice and it's guiding you. And not questioning it. I mean, I love what you're saying. Like, you have so many examples of, no, it's right. It's right. So when do I stop fighting with it? And it sounds like you've really shifted that over the years. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. I have. One of the interesting parts was when I spent so many years trying to kind of like either not paying attention to it or shut it down. Yeah. I am much better. I remember when people would ask me about it, I would say, well, I mean, I'm much better at like getting it for other people. And that was the thing. Like, Casey and I would talk about this a lot. And I was like, I was like, I'm like super powerful when it comes to prayer. Like, whenever I pray for it, it's totally going to happen. Or if I see it's going to happen for you. I'm like, but for me, like, whatever I'm thinking or what won't happen. And Casey's like, I don't think intuition works that way. She's like, I think you need to like focus on you, and then you'll be able to pick up on more stuff related to you. But because of how I'm wired as a human, like, I'm so giving, people tell me, and I'm so like into my other friends, and everything happens in their lives, that I don't always take the time to like pause and say what's going to happen with mine. So
what a good observation, what a good learning. I don't know what the right word is. Like a realization right now to say, what would happen if I used that superpower for me? Right. More consistently. That's great. Yeah. If Angie, if you had to go back and tell 20-year-old or second grade you, even like younger you, anything about intuition, what would you say?
The first thing that came to my head was, you're not crazy.
Okay.
That was that's really the first thing that jumps out in my head. And I don't know why. I think because maybe I was so scared of it, of like that people, if I said something, people would think I was crazy. And I was like, I'm not crazy, and you're not crazy. Like, it's okay. Like, it's, and maybe you need to take some time to be quiet I hate quiet. I mean, I absolutely hate quiet. Well, there's nothing going on. There is nothing more nightmarish to someone who's never been married, has never lived with a partner. I lived with my sister and roommates and stuff, but not like a romantic partner. And I'm like, to me, it's like a worst nightmare. And I've talked about this. I'm like, I'm going to take a trip up by myself and it sounds awful. And you're like, what? Like, I would love to take a trip where I'm having to listen to my 2 daughters or my husband, which you love very much, but like what they want to do, it's all about me. And I'm like, that's terrifying. And so I'm trying to get better at not distracting myself when I am quiet to see if I can like open up to whatever's going on. I will say that meditation is very difficult for me. I don't know if it's ADHD. I don't know what it is, but like a traditional, I mean, I've paid for that daggone Calm app every year and I've dropped $100 or however much it costs. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. And I'll sit there and I'll do it for like a week or two. And then nope. I've read all sorts of books or listened to books, let's be honest, on meditation. And I'm still like, so I think that's why, like, I was listening to one of your more recent episodes this morning. I was walking Rambo, and you were talking about how you've been on vacation and how you got a little bit out of whack because you weren't doing your normal routine. And I remember thinking like, and I know Martha was talking about some of her normal routine. I was like, I wish I could do a routine like that, but it just never. I cannot get into it. So what's your secret sauce? Like how do you do that?
Well, I think what Martha and I have talked, we do it very differently, right? So Martha is not a sit still and go inside kind of person. She moves her body, and I think that's important for all of our listeners to understand is that there's not one size fits all with meditation. And to me, meditation is just listening inward, right? And as you've heard us talk about, it's that how do you learn to trust yourself? And that's the biggest thing. Nobody else has to get it. That voice is for you first and foremost. And when you listen to that and trust it, it becomes a really good GPS. So for you, Angie, maybe it's just not, maybe you're a walking meditation person. My hunch is you're when you're quiet walking Rambo, you're tuning in.
I can go through a room. Here's a great example. My mom's downsizing. And she reaches out and she says, okay, what paintings do you want from our house? And I'm like, she sent a text and I called my sister. I was like, dude, is it bad that I literally can't picture the inside of their house? And she's like, what do you mean you can't picture it? I said, well, I mean, she's like, they've lived there since 2018. I said, yeah, I know. But I was like, their house, like when my parents downsized the first time, I kid you not, they took every piece of art that they had in that multiple bedroom house and stuck it in this little tiny condo that they're in now.
Oh, wow.
And so it is literally, my brother calls it Cracker Barrel. Mom will never, I can say that because like everything's like so tight and I'm not good at noticing what's around it. Like it's very hard for me to, I guess, ground myself at her house. And I was like, that is a really recent example that's really had me thinking. I'm like, how do I not notice those details about what's happening? So that's why I think grounding and understanding what that means, I think is going to be helpful for me because like, everything just seems to come at me as so overwhelming. I think my brain just kind of like glosses over certain things.
Well, what I appreciate about our conversation today, Angie, is that you're naming what I think happens for a lot of people, which is I hear it, but I'm so distracted with the outside world, either to keep myself safe or because I'm very extroverted or, whatever the reason that it doesn't occur to you, right, to slow down and actually be quiet, or it feels uncomfortable because it's different. So I think that's a great thing to recognize. And Martha's secret sauce on that one is walk the dogs in the woods, right, and just let what pop in. But we're not accustomed to that, right? Like we're so accustomed to filling every second with, it's an opportunity to, like you said, catch up, listen to a podcast, do something. So I think that's great. I think that's great.
Always a work in progress, as they say.
Me too. Well, I want to thank you so very much for sharing your story with our listeners today.
Absolutely.
And thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Hey friends, you thought we were gone, but we're back. I'm glad you stayed. If you like what you heard, click those 5 stars. And if you really like what you heard, please write us a review. And share with your friends. Thanks.